So, this isn't a new episode of my 776 guide. Sorry, but that's gonna have to wait a bit longer, because something else Fire Emblem related just fell on my lap that has made me put everything on full stop so that I may properly address it. To put it bluntly, Fire Emblem Fates is pretty much dead to me. The way the game has been peeled apart since its Japanese release, and the stuff we now know, have forsaken me from buying the game in its current state. I will not support the game, or its creators, because of the absolutely insulting, offensive, and downright mean way they are supporting gay inclusiveness in Fates. Let me explain, though I'll need to provide some history as well. One of the big-ish criticisms of the otherwise pretty solid Fire Emblem Awakening was the complete absence of homosexual relationships. There was plenty of teasing, and in the English localization of Summer Festival, Kiel is revealed to at least be sexually attracted to another girl, yet nothing else comes of it. And this isn't the only instance of teasing without pulling the trigger. Blazing Sword had Lyn and Florina, which you really don't need to squint to see as romantic in their support. Yet, nope, they're just friends. Or at least they're just friends in the localization, because there is evidence of homosexual trends being subdued in another Fire Emblem English translation. Radiant Dawn had Heather, who flirts with girls in many conversations and also expresses sadness over not being able to meet the beautiful Queen Elincia. Curiously though, despite all this, one line she gives was removed in the localization. A line where she states that her reason for joining the Crimean army was, and I quote, to meet all the pretty girls. So, Fire Emblem has had the presence of homosexual subject matter, but Intelligent Systems has been very stubborn over making anything explicit, at least in the English localization. This is a problem that should have been solved with the reveal that Fire Emblem Fates will finally include homosexual relationship options. Except they took one step forward and then stumbled back and fell into a dirty puddle. The problem with Fates' apparent progress is staggering. Right away, they give an unnecessary exclusion to it. Opposite-sex couples get a S rank support, while same-sex couples get a A+ rank. This has so many problems just on its own, but most of all, it gives the viewpoint of homosexuality as lesser and also apart from heterosexuality. There is literally zero reason for this distinction, but all the reason to not. Things get worse when you come to the actual inclusivity of homosexuality, and all its two options. Yes, two options, both for the player-created avatar, and I kid you not, they're split between two versions of the game. If you didn't know already, Fates is basically being sold like a new generation of Pokemon. Two versions entitled Birthright and Conquest are being marketed, with a third being planned for a later DLC release. As boneheaded as it sounds, the single male option for a same-sex relationship is locked away in Conquest, while the single female option is locked away in Birthright. Though the article explaining this does mention that they will both be available in the third DLC path. What Fates is essentially doing here is marking homosexual relationships just like Game Freak does with legendary Pokemon. Oh, you want the option to have a male partner? Well, you gotta get this version. Being basically no different now from having to buy Omega Ruby in order to get Groudon. Except you can trade Pokemon, so you don't need to get both to get the full experience. And this analogy is run away. Where were we again? Right, so the game is treating same-sex relationships as a cheap marketing ploy, which may not seem different from treating other relationships and the return of children as cheap marketing ploys, but there it's as, look at all the options, whereas with the other it's, buy this game to get this option. Pretty deplorable, if you ask me. Now here is where I talk about the actual writing and character of the two same-sex options, which, by the way, are Shara, or Ciara, or Ciala for women, and Zero for men. I must state that almost everything from here on out may be viewed as speculation. The game does not have an official translation yet, and friend translations are often pretty wonky. But what has cropped up with everything I will be speaking about is mostly basic character traits that have already been revealed, or are pretty hard to confuse by a decent translator. So, first off, Shara is an XP of Saria from Awakening to everything but name. They appear to have the same basic personality, and in her supports with the Avatar, she claims that they are the reincarnations of Robin and Saria from Awakening. This revelation in my eyes doesn't even really make this a homosexual pairing anymore. Saria could hardly be viewed as bi, even though her supports with the Avatar basically didn't differ in gender, aside from the male version having an S rank. She's straight, but also Avatar sexual. The same appears to be the case here. They're treating this as a reincarnation romance, so I find it hard to call this even a homosexual option. Chara's just avatar sexual as well. Now, maybe this next grit is more biased and petty, but really anything related to Saria is just all kinds of wrong in my eyes. Saria was a terrible character in Awakening, a creepy stalker archetype, and also someone who was revealed to abuse their daughter and spouse and supports. Yuck. Zero, on the other hand, can be viewed just as problematically. His main character shtick is that he's a sadist, which automatically makes me think of the dreaded depraved bisexual trope that I'm just absolutely sick to death of, and only ever really worked with Volgan from Metal Gear Solid 3. But again, haven't been able to read any further into it since there is no accurate translation of his supports, so this stuff gets mercifully put to bed. To where I must now shift my attention to the 10,000 kilogram golden elephant in the room, Soleil. Soleil likes girls. It's a big part of her character. She apparently finds most boys unattractive and prefers hitting on cute girls. But she has this problem of fainting when in the presence of them. Now, this alone has a lot of arguing over whether it's just a quirky character gimmick or if it degrades homosexuality by making it into a running gag. I won't take either case here because I don't feel qualified to speak about it, and it's not even the biggest problem here. Despite this seemingly primary character trait, Soleil has 0 female romantic partners. Zilch, nada, not even the female avatar. Not any other woman that would make more sense given this characteristic. She does, however, have several male romantic partners. And her personal special skill is even called Girl Lover. Yet, whoever was in charge of her character clearly didn't care about all this and still restricted her to men. However, the worst, most absolutely sickening thing related to Soleil is her support with the male avatar, which has been translated pretty well despite a few reading hiccups that people have also been arguing over. The basic gist is that in their support, the male avatar slips Soleil a magic roofie that makes her see every guy as a girl in order to try and help with her fainting spells. And this later on translates to Soleil falling for the female-looking avatar, and then also the male-looking one. Do I even have to go over how many issues this has? The biggest cause for concern, when this was initially revealed, was that the support reads as a gay conversion story, which I'll admit isn't exactly true. Soleil is pretty much bi, but that's only because her character is murdered by having male partners. If she had none but romancing with the male avatar was still an option, it would read as gay conversion. And even then, it implicitly reinforces the horridly negative stereotype of, and apologies for the harsh language, fucking someone straight. But even if you ignore this troubling issue, the avatar is still secretly giving Soleil a drug that eventually makes her fall in love with him. I mean, wow. Just wow. And people are actually defending this. This reminds me a lot of Avengers 200 and its bastardization of Ms. Marvel. I'm not a super avid comic book aficionado, so if you want to read into how fucked up that eventually got, go watch MovieBob's excellent 2-parter on it here. But the basic gist is that Ms. Marvel gets abducted, brainwashed, raped, and then gives birth to her rapist, whom she is brainwashed into falling in love with. Now, there are many more gender and sexuality issues that have come up with Fates. Go read Soleil and Foleo support here if you actually want more, but this is where I'm going to stop. As my final point, I want to make it clear that it is good to take risks. It is good to strive to be diverse and inclusive with your games, and that just because sometimes these efforts are criticized does not mean that they are worthless, as you cannot improve without junking the wrong. But if you're going to be this lazy, this insensitive, this shameless with all of those efforts, I may have to say they really aren't worth the effort. And I am straining to think now that maybe Fates would end up better if it junked all its tries to have this otherwise welcome diversity. I will not be buying Fire Emblem Fates in its current state because of all the negativity it has surrounded homosexual characters with, and I am left with the plead and hope that the next Fire Emblem game will not be made by Intelligent Systems, and instead by a studio that actually cares about sexual, but also gender and racial issues enough to have them be intelligent, thought out, and most importantly, natural. This has been ModelOmega, and thank you for watching.